Welcome to Film Theory reaction from the two best homeless people on the YouTubes. That's why I wear glasses, to kind of offset some of the homeless look that I naturally possess.
This homeless guy reads.
It's the branding, though. It's the brand. Homeless brand, a very specific market. Now that the homeless population is on the rise, we're trying to do more sponsorships that will tend to them.
So,
Spider-Man No Way Homeless, am I right? Anyway, if you're offended by that, you're not homeless. The homeless people aren't even watching. They can't.
Go give some money or buy somebody a sandwich.
Let's watch this today. Apparently, they got some shit to prove here. I need to go back and see what their last theory was, because I kind of forgot it. Spider-Man Save No One. 3 Spider-Man No Way Home theories. You know, we gotta check this out.
Okay, let's be real, Spider-Man No Way Home was a blast. If nothing else, you have to admire a movie that brought together 3 separate franchises spanning 20 years. Sure,
I agree.
It was impressive and all, but that was always the end game for the MCU from the very beginning. But here, no one could have seen this one coming. Just absolutely so much fun, which means that now we have to rip this thing to shreds, because that ending, man, we have got to talk about it. Well, the movie was great and all. Peter Parker's final wish left me with a lot of questions. It seems like I'm not the only one.
I mean, does the guy have a birth certificate? A social security card?
What happens with all the videos and news reports about him being Spider-Man?
So, what did old Tommy Holland actually wish for in the final moments of the movie?
Shout out.
And what does that actually translate to based on every clue that we see in the film's final moments? And more importantly, what does it mean for the future of this character and this franchise? That, my friends, is
Spider-Man
what
not
I'm
home.
aiming to answer today.
Let's see if they can answer this.
If anybody can.
I am interested in hearing how they can answer this, because even the screenwriters came out. I forget what newspaper article it was, but they were saying that they didn't even have an answer for a lot of this, that they realized they could go down this whole rabbit hole, that they just focused solely on the emotion and not some of the logistics regarding it.
That really shows.
I was like, that's interesting.
I guess it worked, but that's a very, very risky way to play
That's
it.
a bold way of putting it, too.
Especially
we
in
don't
nerd
know.
culture. Because then you get these videos.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, where I use my Peter Tingle each and every week to spot and solve lore mysteries, obviously.
Worst over.
Okay, so Spider-Man No Way Home really needs no introduction at this point. It seems like everyone in the world has seen this thing. Probably has, actually, considering that it had
the people in the
#2
Philippines.
opening weekend of all time of any movie ever. That is insane. In fact, it only took that one single weekend to make it the highest grossing movie of 2021. After a year where theaters were really struggling to find their footing, the old webhead proved that people were willing to come back, provided you have a huge IP, pay off one of cinema's biggest cliffhangers, and tap into 20 years of built-up nostalgia. You know, no biggie. But this movie really does have it all. Lots of bad guys come together, Tobey Maguire getting his back cracked, great power, great responsibility, all that stuff. Really solid across the board. But gotta be honest here, anytime you tamper with the multiverse, you're gonna be getting some questions from lore nerds like me, and this movie leaves open some big ones. Questions that I aim to definitively answer today. Or, you know, as definitive as I can until they retcon something to fit the ongoing narrative that they're looking to tell. First and foremost, why are we only seeing the villains? As a reminder, the entire premise of the movie kicks off when Peter Parker asks Doctor Strange to cast a spell that makes everyone forget that he's Spider-Man. After Peter tampers with the spell one too many times, it breaks the fabric of reality, opening the door for villains like Lizard and
Dr. Otto Octavius
to come through from other universes, because, as the movie tells us, they knew the Spider-Man Peter Parker connection. At least most of them did, prompting our first major discussion here. Electro is a bit hazy on this point, since in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Max Dillon never explicitly makes the Peter Parker Spider-Man connection. In fact, it seems like No Way Home acknowledges this. There's even a joke about it where Electro, upon seeing Andrew Garfield's face at the end of the movie, says that he'd assumed that Peter Parker was gonna be black the entire time. So, is that just the writers being sloppy so they can fit in a Miles Morales joke, or are they actually playing some level of 4D chess that we mere nerds aren't privy to? Well, there are 2 possible ways to explain Electro's presence, both of which require a fair amount of squinting to make work. First, we hear in No Way Home that Electro was, and this is a direct quote from the movie that I can't play for obvious reasons, he was stuck in the grid.
Exactly, that's exactly where I was going with this. Yeah.
And he dies. Now, this isn't exactly true if you go back to the source material. Electro was actually in a power grid, specifically a hydroelectric power grid. And I know science wasn't your strongest suit, Hollywood, so this might come as a shock to you, but electricity is different different than the internet. I know, I was just as blown away as you are. But I guess if you're assuming that he's absorbing electricity
It's all a
and
series
internet
of
in this
tubes.
scene, then you could say that Max got the info through accessing Peter's online data. Maybe. Like I said, it's a pretty weak sauce explanation. The other angle here, and this is the one that I think is canonical to the story and also works with the whole I thought you'd be black joke, is that Max does know Spider-Man's name is Peter, he just doesn't know his face. In the final fight, Electro is knocked unconscious after playing the itsy bitsy spider on the power
And then
grid.
Gwen comes
This
out,
movie just makes
or
all
Goblin,
those
yeah?
decisions. Gwen Stacy arrives and calls out to Peter, at which point we smash cut to Electro becoming alert and ready to attack again.
When I say you turn that power on, you turn it on, no matter what. Peter.
So that definitely explains how Electro knows that Spider-Man's name is Peter, but I think that there's still a missing piece here.
I mean, him knowing his name is Peter is not really anything. It's just a name. It's like it's a common American name, Peter. It's saying that just because he knows the name Peter doesn't mean he knows Peter Parker in the face or anything at all of which Peter out of all of New York City this would be. You know?
No, he knew that Peter snuck into, Oscorp that one day in the first movie, and then he was like all about it. He kept track of it. That's my fan theory.
You're just one of those nerds who
John
just
theory.
justifies everything.
It can't be a plot hole, otherwise it's not the best.
I think that there's still a missing piece here, and that's Peter's best friend, Harry, who breaks Electro out of captivity to help him take care of Spider-Man.
I'm Harry Osborn. I want to make you a deal. You want Spider-Man, and I can give him to you.
At this point in the movie, Harry knows that Peter and Spider-Man share some sort of connection.
You took his picture. You know him.
Harry most likely tells all of this to Electro after he breaks him out. So when Max hears the name Peter from Gwen, he's able to make that final connection to Peter Parker, Harry's friend that he was told about. Oh boy, there you go, screenwriters. I saved your butts on that one. Something tells me that no one really intended all of that, but it does manage to work out when you read between the lines.
No, I still think it's a plot hole.
No, it's definitely a plot hole.
That's a lot of leaps and bounds that nearly unconscious Electro would have to put together. When he hears Peter, and it instantly just Peter Parker, Harry Osborn's talking about must be that one. He doesn't know for sure. If anything, he's working off of a film theory at that point.
I guess at best.
It doesn't bother me either way. That's not something I'm hung up on. I'm just glad he's in the movie.
I'm more interested in the bigger question, why only the villains? Why don't we see anyone else come through here?
Couldn't afford 'em.
Girlfriends or best friends. In the Sam Raimi trilogy, Mary Jane knows Peter's identity all too well.
Go get him, Tiger.
And in The Amazing Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy treats it like it's the most casual thing in the world.
Consider coming in through the lobby.
The best friends in these movies also tend to know. The Harry Osborns from both universes know Peter's secret.
First we'll see who's behind the mask.
So, was this just a decision made out of convenience, or is there an actual in-universe explanation for it? Well, believe it or not, but this one actually lines up pretty well with the lore. I don't know, again, if this was intentional or not, but as Doctor Strange prepares his magic, Peter requests that his girlfriend, his best friend, and Aunt May all get exempted from the spell.
So MJ's gonna.
I'm skeptical of that one,
Strange
but
removes them from the magic to try and meet Peter's request. However, when the whole thing goes haywire and people who knew Peter's identity start crossing over, those people are still eliminated. As such, all the girlfriends, best friends, and aunts aren't included and therefore don't cross over into the MCU. Was it intentional? No, probably not. Is it a cool coincidence that helps explain the rationale for that part of the movie? Yeah, I think so. One of the other
bad
things
at
the movie
all.
just kind of glosses over that I thought was interesting to think about was the implication of curing all of these characters. The whole second act of the movie is Peter sacrificing and losing everything, including Aunt May, to try and cure these villains, working under the assumption that he's saving their lives and giving them a second chance in their own universes. Except, nope, that is decidedly not true. The Sandman doesn't die in his movie, so kind of a lost cause there. Same thing with the Lizard, who already is transformed back into a human by the end of his movie, so redundancy is redundant. That leaves Electro and Green Goblin, neither of whom want to be cured, which opens a big ol' can of ethical worms about forcing a cure on individuals that don't want to be cured. But worst of all, perhaps, is the
wanna see that
situation
Spider-Man
for
movie.
Doc Ock, who, if you actually look back at the original movie, wouldn't be saved at all. In No Way Home, he says that he's portaled over into Tom Holland's reality in the middle of a battle against Spider-Man. Specifically, he says, quote, "Spider-Man was trying to stop my fusion reactor, so I stopped him. I had him by the throat, and then I was here." One teeny tiny any problem with that. By the time Doc Ock has Spider-Man by the throat in Spider-Man 2, his fusion reactor is already seconds away from exploding. It is far beyond the point of saving. The good doctor himself is mere seconds away from his own redemption at this point.
Listen to me now.
Seriously, Doc Ock already makes the decision to turn good and sacrifice himself. So Tom Holland's help with a fixed neural implant here also amounts to just a meaningless gesture for something that was gonna happen anyway. In short, this whole movie was extraneous because you either don't change any character's outcome or you just cure people who don't want to be cured in the first place. Sorry about your sacrifice, Aunt May. Doesn't look like it did much good, but hey, at least you got to say the iconic line.
That was a big part of where I felt it was kind of lackluster with Doc Ock. By the time he's, cured in, I don't know why I air quoted it. He is cured, except he still has the tentacles attached. Can you hear
He's
tentacles?
augmented.
Yeah,
He's better.
I'm just an extension of myself now. Yeah.
I am my final form.
But when he comes back to his human self that is not controlled by the desires of the tentacles, right? It did hit me like this, even on the first time watching it. Like, well, I feel like we just watched a less interesting arc from villain to going back to yourself. According to this movie, you were only seconds away of being that already. Yeah, that whole plot hole with him going back to it. What they proved here was exactly what a lot of us were already kind of speculating on, right?
Is you just basically took him for a side quest moments before his inevitable death because of the sacrifice he chose to make of his own volition.
But they don't say when Green Goblin got pulled, right? They don't specify that in the movie.
I don't think so.
He doesn't show up looking like he just
He's
got
all
in a fight with Peter Parker.
and rubble and whatnot. So yeah, it seems like he got plucked the earliest maybe out of all of them.
Yeah.
Except for Lizard.
I mean, yeah, they don't say when Lizard gets plucked. I feel like they completely forgot all about what Lizard was like.
I think they did a lot of rewrites in a small amount of time, and when they arrived at a good idea, they really didn't have all the time in the world to go back and like script supervise. Like, does this match these old movies from 10, 20 years ago? I forget it. Let's just go with the emotions of Peter.
I was thinking what they could have done to make Sandman more interesting is justify the choice to keep him in Sand, other than learning the behind-the-scenes facts that they couldn't get Thomas Hayden Church to be on set. They could have said like they have to cure him because he is stuck in this form now.
Yeah, it's
that
like
would have been so much more interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, now you justify why he looks like this the whole movie.
Yeah, he's not a bad guy. And then it's like, oh, off screen, has he been living some kind of Frankenstein story all over again with like this inescapable curse now?
Yeah, because he doesn't leave cured or exactly becoming a hero. He just ends on a good note with Peter.
Powers,
he ends on a note of like, you forgive me, Peter. Good, we cried it out. Awesome.
Bro,
everyone's crying.
I respect you, peace.
But now, the big one, the ending wish. At the end of the movie, the Green Goblin uses a pumpkin bomb to destroy the Deus Vox Machina, causing reality to shred and even more entities to try and cross over into Tom Holland's universe. Doctor Strange tries to repair the rift, but it's just too much. He can't contain it. So with no other option, Peter makes one final sacrifice. He asks Strange to make the world forget about Peter Parker. Now, I've rewatched this scene a couple of times, and this is exactly how it's transcribed.
They're here because of you.
What if everyone forgot who I was? They're coming here because of me, right? Because I'm Peter Parker. So
I love this acting.
This time,
Please put this on like Audible or some shit.
Me.
That would mean everyone
MatPat
who
reads No
knows
Way
and
Home.
loves you would have no memory of you. It would be as though you never existed.
And it works. The rift gets repaired and the world no longer knows the identity of Spider-Man. Hooray! But it comes at the cost of MJ, Ned, Happy, and all the others having no clue who Peter is. So it's just a simple memory wipe spell, right? What's so complicated to understand about that? Well, if only it were that simple. As Peter and Disney are more than happy to remind us of repeatedly throughout the movie, Peter is the most famous person in the world at this point because Mysterio outed him as the identity of Spider-Man. And he did this in the form of a video. Did that video get wiped away by the spell? Sure, let's assume that it was. But then what about all the other physical evidence of Peter Parker?
Here we go.
Before the big climax, Peter takes a selfie video that gets broadcast out to the world. Does that disappear too? Or his text messages to MJ? Or Flash's book? Are those all just gone? What about his application to MIT? The simple answer here would be that the spell dusted all of those things too. All physical traces of Peter Parker just poof away. Like Doctor Strange said, it'll be as though you never existed. Except yet again, it's not that clear cut. We see in the final scenes of the movie that MJ is wearing the broken Black Dahlia necklace that Peter gave her in the previous movie. In addition, we learn that both Ned and MJ have gotten into MIT, something that Peter had a direct hand in earlier in the film. So it seems like his physical actions interactions have had some sort of memory on the world.
Hey, that's a good point. That's a great point.
Doesn't necessarily remember him. So maybe Peter's just gone then, right? Everything he touched and altered up to that point stays, but anything with the name Peter Parker on it's just dusted away.
Or maybe people can't recognize it.
On one hand, we see Peter studying for his GEDs. For those of you who don't know, the GED here in the US is a test that allows you to show that you have high school level skills. By taking it and passing it functions pretty much the same way as a diploma. So the fact that he's taking it implies either A, that his academic record has been erased as part of the spell, or B, he isn't returning to finish the school year. Again, most likely because he no longer has a student record. But on the other hand, we see Peter get himself an apartment. This implies that he has to have himself some level of an identity, as well as a fairly decent credit score. As anyone who's ever tried to get an apartment can tell you, you need a social security number and a history of income to be able to lease from a landlord.
Where would his income come from?
That's huge.
But of all the conflicting evidence we have, none perhaps is as confusing as his interactions with Happy at Aunt May's grave. When Peter asks how he knew her, Happy replies, through Spider-Man. So Happy knows Spider-Man, but again, not Peter Parker. How could that possibly make any sense? Because Happy knows May, not
He's
via
gotta have so
Spider-Man,
much
but
amnesia.
because Spider-Man is connected to Peter Parker. Without the link of Peter Parker, there's no way for Happy to meet May. And yet, somehow, under the arbitrary rules of the spell, he does apparently know her, which then prompts the question, does that mean MJ, under the memory spell, remembers being Spider-Man's girlfriend? Because again, she knows Spider-Man, but she doesn't know Peter? Same thing with Ned. Does he know that he's Spider-Man's guy in the chair? So taking all of the evidence and questions into account, I think there's only one way to explain all of this. The spell doesn't erase Peter Parker from existence. It just erases people's memory of him, and along with that, erases any physical thing that would be considered or connected to a memory of him.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
Peter's
that's a good way to put it.
the aftermath of thing that he's explicitly done, those all remain. It's a difference of qualitative versus quantitative actions, which is pretty confusing, so let me explain with some examples. Mysterio's video claiming that he's being attacked by Spider-Man, that still exists, because it was tied to an action that was being done by Spider-Man. But the part where he calls out Peter Parker, that now is gone, because it would be dependent on Mysterio knowing Peter Parker.
Okay.
Flash's book, gone, because
Okay.
again, it's based on Flash's relationship and memories with Peter Parker. Meanwhile, Peter's bank account and social security number, those would remain. Earning money and putting it into a bank, or being given a social security number, are physical acts that don't hinge on the memory or identity of Peter Parker. Just like giving a physical necklace to MJ. She has the necklace, but I would guess she doesn't remember where she got it from. Those actions exist separate from the identity of Peter. Basically, when people see his name, they'll just think of him as some random anonymous person, like we see MJ do in the coffee shop.
That is actually the best explanation I have heard.
Absolutely.
I still feel like, because what was the phrase he was using? Qualitative versus quantitative?
Yeah, qualitative versus
Yeah.
quantitative actions.
Using that theory, it would line up the best. I still feel like it messes with time in some way, though. It messes with the past, because there's got to be some like very specific gaps in memory that are forming due to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's also a lot of off-screen memories that we obviously were not made privy to. Certain scenes that involve like very direct memories with Peter Parker and Aunt May and Happy in the same room. So are there times where Happy remembers helping out Spider-Man but forgets every time he was interacting with Peter, like all the events in London?
Yeah, does he just have tons and tons of gaps, or
Yeah, dude, does everyone
is there just a blur where Peter used to be?
Still create some like gaps for sure if we are going off of this one. Granted, it's the best one I've heard so far.
It has a good cause and effect kind of balance. Just there are too many directions holes can come out of this choice.
Yeah.
It does the most to patch up the most holes, but it still doesn't patch them all up.
Because it would explain too when they come back to J. Jonah and he's like, Spider-Man's still a menace, but they don't know who he is.
Yeah.
At the end of it all. So to explain that. At the same time, I am still left here scratching my head going, but with the way the brain works, have you really messed some people up too? Yeah.
Causality.
What then would this mean for the series? Well, if I'm right, it would mean that both MJ and Ned shouldn't remember their interactions with Spider-Man. To both of them, he was Peter Parker first, and when they're helping Spider-Man, they're really helping Peter. So all of those memories have got to go. Happy, meanwhile, is able to fall into the opposite bucket. His relationship with Peter started through the identity of Spider-Man, and while he certainly grew to love the boy behind the mask, the root of that relationship was the secret identity, thus allowing him to remember Aunt May and chalk those memories up to Spider-Man's influence. Likewise, Spider-Man should still be able to continue on as an Avenger, but here no one will know his real name, making the eventual reunion with the Guardians of the Galaxy real awkward.
Who are you? We're the Avengers, man.
But to me, what's probably most interesting about all this is how it relates to the Vulture. As you might recall, he's the biggest dangling threat in the series, the only one who knows Spider-Man's identity and who keeps getting teased as pulling together a Sinister Six.
It's not on you. It's on our little spider friend. I've got some boys on the outside who'd love to meet him.
In fact, he's so important that he's being used to market the upcoming Morbius movie.
Hey, Dr. Mike, you and I should stay in touch.
Leaving many to question whether Morbius is now a part of the MCU, and Sony's response thus far has been yesn't. They're real cagey about it, but in reality, no, he's not. This is all just a fake out. By the rules that we've just gone over, the Vulture wouldn't know Peter's secret identity. The scene in the car in Homecoming would be a forgotten memory. As such, all of the teases from both Morbius and Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies should ultimately amount to nothing, and moments in trailers like this are just more instances of movie studios pulling boners. That's a Ralph boner, for those of you who don't get the reference.
You're Ralph Boner?
Boner.
All of it fake outs to sell tickets.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this video. I just gotta ask though, what exactly is MatPat implying by saying that this is a fake out? Because I get that Vulture would no longer know the identity of Spider-Man, so it makes it not as weighty, I suppose. But at the same time, it still is kind of a big deal because Vulture ultimately has still a vendetta towards Spider-Man. He developed this vendetta against him before he ever learned that Peter Parker really is him. So I'm not sure what the fake out is really implying. I don't know, I was watching it back and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a little bit lost here. Clarify.
No Way Home. A lot of seeming gaps in the plot that just squeak by getting solved if you look at them deep enough. Well done, screenwriters. You've escaped me this time. Which leaves us then with a single Spider-Man who has literally no history. What a nice clean slate to start a brand new trilogy on. One might call it a reboot of sorts. And wait, who was it that predicted that? By whatever means Wanda Maximoff zaps in during the post-credit scene to set us up for the multiverse of madness, the story is going to wrap up in such a way that while there can be a path forward for Tom Holland's Peter Parker, he can also be soft rebooted. I guess sometimes even a blind squirrel finds a nut. But hey,
you guys are always ready to pat yourselves on the back.
Film theory and cut.
Always Matt patting yourself on the back when you get something right. I think people who do breakdowns, they have to do that.
They do, because it takes a lot to break these things down.
There's so much wrong though when they get it right. You gotta point it out.
And you have to risk your credibility.
Yeah, constantly. It's constant. I always point it out for me.
Yeah,
if I get something right. I'm seeing that all the time with the Morbius thing on the poster. I'm like, I said this a while ago. Now everyone's new thumbnails, or hey, that poster in the Morbius, it's probably Andrew Garfield.
I said that before it was kind of obvious.
I said that before any comment ever said it. I totally did. I beat everyone. I beat everyone. First person I've ever thought it, man. Yeah. And you guys give me no credit.
Yeah, man. Where do you get off?
Yeah, what the hell, man? I definitely wasn't the first. Although I can't think of someone who said it before I had the thought.
Well, there you go.
Guys, subscribe to Film Theory. Click that notification bell, hit that like button. We will thwip you guys soon, but before that, pick Rosa Para. Rosa Para, it's a new year, so happy new year to you. And you know what? As much as we've been calling you the Lady Stark of our Patreon page for this long, if there was a new year wish I could have for you, it was that we could erase the identity of your children. I just know that that would just save you so much money.
Oh, yeah.
And so much stress. You'd be able to produce twice, maybe 3 times as many reviews.
You can never stop watching movies.
If your kids were just in your home and then you called the cops and said, police, there are 3 homeless children living at my home. Police show up, no record of them. They get shipped off to the orphanage. Best part is you forgot who they are too. So now you have no guilt,
plausible deniability.
Shame. You're scot-free at that point.
Yeah.
When I'm able to get in touch with some wizard of sorts to help the world forget about who your children are, you're not even gonna remember to thank me because you're gonna forget about the whole ordeal.
Man.
And I'm gonna be sitting here smiling, not knowing why, because I would have forgotten them too. Because that's how the spell works.
That's how the world ends.
Nah, I'm just kidding. I love you, and I want your children to be
Your
happy
kids
too.
are the best
They're
kids.
the best in the world. I'm just joking. Don't let them watch this video, please. I'm sorry.